Do you have a bunch of shitty old paints in your cupboard? If you do, keep watching, because this is what I've done with mine, and I am so glad that I did. Welcome to my crafting channel. I'm Alana from Upcycling NZ. Let's upcycle. So I've got some salvage paints. These are house paints. They're quite high quality, but they're the dregs that people were getting rid of, and I salvaged them from a dump store. So I'm going to be using some of these to make some chalk paint today. I did quite a lot of research before attempting this, so I've shortcut a lot of mistakes, and I'm going straight to the talcum powder method. I've got about half a bottle of talcum powder here, and I'll use all of that and see how much paint I can make from it. So what I learned by researching was that the better the quality paint you use, the better your chalk paint will be. The paints that I'm using today are all water-based. They all have different sort of sheens, low sheen, semi-gloss, etc. But it doesn't really matter because they are all going to end up in a matte finish. I'll be starting with the three palest shades that I have, and you can see from some of these tin lids that the tins are quite corroded and the paint's going to start to get contaminated as a result. So I'll start with the palest one of all, and I want to create a white with this one. Because I want to increase the volume of paint that I have here, I'm going to add the next palest colour, which kind of has a blue tinge to it. So I'm only adding as much as I think I need to maintain my white colour. I'm quite happy with that colour, so I'm going to take a little bamboo board that I have, and let's have a look how opaque the colour is. And remember, this is the paint component only. I'm quite happy with how that is. So I'm going to start with 1/3 chalk to 2/3 paint, and I'm eyeballing this. The cool thing about using talcum powder is it does not go lumpy in your paint. It'll begin to lump up when you first start to mix it, but then it smooths out as it mixes better into the paint. The consistency is really thick and it kind of puffs the paint up, so I'm adding some water so that I can create the consistency that I want. It's really a matter of preference how thick you want your paint, so I'm happy with that consistency. It's quite thick and textured, and you can see the brush strokes in it like you can when you're using chalk paint. I'm going to put 3 little test squares under the original paint, and I'll show you what I'm going to test on those a bit later. So I'm going to paint the lid of my jar. I do this whenever I put paints into a jar, just so that I can identify the colour easily. And we'll call this one colour number 1. For the next one, I'm going to start with this very sandy grey coloured base. I'm going to tint this colour up a little bit. I want to warm it up a bit. So I'm going to add some coloured house paints. Now I bought 3 primary colours in this paint so that I could create all the colours of the rainbow, and when I do my crafts in these acrylics, they're wipeable and washable, and I can create pieces for outdoors with them. The colour's pretty close to what I'm looking for, and I'm going to warm it up a little bit more by adding this little bottle of acrylic paint that's half full. I'll use this bottle up because the paint's too thick and it's too hard to get out of that little bottle. I'll do my first little test square now that I know that this is the colour I'm looking for, before once again adding some talcum powder and turning this into chalk paint. This is colour number 2. So already I've noticed a difference in the amount of talcum powder I've added between paints number 1 and number 2, so it's definitely something that you have to do based on the consistency. These first 3 colours are going to be quite pale and there won't be a big difference between them, but I'm running out of talcum powder, so I'm going for the most volume I can get for my first 3 colours. Next I want a creamier white, so I'll use the rest of that little yellow bottle of acrylic, and I'm having to use the pale blue white. So I need to warm that up and create a lot more yellow brown to that colour. This time I'll add the talcum powder while I'm mixing the colour so that I don't end up using too much paint to the amount of talcum powder that I'm using. I'm not going to go overboard tinting this colour. I really do want it to be more of a white, just with a creamier aspect to it. So adding yellow and orange to the blue tint that white was originally is working. So I have colour number 3. It's very thick, so I'll add quite a lot of water, and that's increasing my volume of paint as well. I'll skip the original paint test square because I mixed the talcum powder in before I had my colour. There are my 3 neutrals, and now I'm going to move on to some colours, and now I have to use chalk paints only because I've got no more talcum powder. And I'm just using a whole lot of leftovers which got quite chalky because they were at the bottom of the bottles, and it allows me to add quite a lot of tint colour without losing the chalkiness of these paints. To darken them up, I'm using a little bit of black chalk paint, and I use that in a lot of these colours just to change the overall appearance of the colour. I'm loving the colour I've got here, so I'll call that colour number 4. A lot of the chalk paints I'll be using for my colours were colours I actually wasn't using, I didn't really like. So now I can create these gorgeous colours that I do love. I'll just do 2 little test strips for each of these chalk paint colours. I'll spare you from watching all of the colour mixing and let you listen to some music while you see the colours that I created. I've been able to create 5 beautiful colours and 3 neutrals, and look at that gorgeous colour palette. Not to mention all of these shitty old paints and containers that I can now get rid of out of my stash. The paint was either too thick in those bottles and I couldn't get it out, the containers were rusty and old, or they were just colours that I didn't like. So I'm getting rid of all of those. So now let's see how this chalk paint performs, which is the real test. I wanted to see how my talcum powder chalk paint takes antiquing wax. So I'll put a little strip along one side of each of the test squares. And I found that colours number 1 and 2 absorbed the antiquing wax really well. Colour number 3 also worked. It just had slightly less absorbency. Chalk paints always need to be sealed, and I often use a clear wax, so I want to see if the clear wax changes the colour of my test samples at all. So you allow the clear wax to sit for 10 minutes or so before buffing it off. And what I found was that the wax gave a bit of depth to the colour but didn't change it at all. So that's a win in my book. The next test is the real test, and that's the scratch test, and I found that the talcum powder paints performed extremely well. Then I moved on to the commercial chalk paints, and most of them performed pretty well. There were a couple that performed less well than others, but remember that this is just one coat of paint. I'm even going to go back and test the unsealed paints and see how they perform. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with all of these results. And I've just had a light bulb moment. Why don't we have a bit of interactive fun and you guys could name these colours for me? I'm going to number them 1 to 8. Then if you put the number and a delicious paint colour name into the comments for me, I'm going to pick my top 8 and I will announce them next week in my next week's video. So I'd need those in by the 22nd of June 2025. That'll give me time to create the video, which will drop on the 24th. And guess what? I'll be doing it in person. I said that after 100,000 views on my channel, I would do an in-person video. Well, next week's video is it. Wish me luck. And to honour you for supporting my channel, I would love if you incorporated your name into the paint colour names. I'm so excited about that. Next, I'm going to take these large tins and we're going to see how the paint performs on actual projects. For these tins, I'm going to take some Glad Wrap and some air dry clay. My clay is terracotta in colour because I accidentally bought the wrong type. It was meant to be white, but it'll still work. I'm just going to take some of it, warm it up in my hands and roll it out with a rolling pin. I thought I might make this quite thick so that it didn't crack once it dried on the surface of my tin. I'm not so sure if I did the right thing though, as you will see coming up. This is the lid off a butter dish and I'm just using it to make an impression and a label surround of sorts. The clay's about 5mm thick at this point. Next I'm taking a little stamp set of French advertising and I'm going to pick a few of these to put impressions into the clay. I've used Glad Wrap underneath or Saran Wrap so that I can peel these off very easily, and I'm going to make 3 of these labels. And I am certainly no expert when it comes to air dry clay, and you will see that shortly. But I'm going to take some epoxy glue. I didn't have a lot left, so I'll just put that around the outside to ensure that I have a really good seal on the outside. And then I'm going to use some wood glue, which was the only other glue I had available, to fill in the centre. This could also be part of the mistake that I made. So I'll apply those to the tins, pressing down gently so as not to press out my impression on the front. And I'll give the edges some special attention because of those extra grooves along the sides. I applied 2 labels the right way round, and one of them I've applied upside down because I'll be using the tin upside down. So here's colour number 1. I had to go to work when I was doing this, but I allowed the labels to dry for an hour. Here's colour number 3. It's supposed to reduce the cracking if you paint it before the air dry clay has dried completely. So I did it quickly before I went to work to allow for the dry time. Here's colour number 5. I'll do the rest of my first coat of paint once this is dried off properly. But look what happened. Great big cracks, and I'm not sure if it was because the clay was too thick, if it was the wood glue that I used in the middle at the back, or if it was because I bent it around the tin. So I'm finishing off the first coat anyway, and I'm going to embrace those cracks because they might even add to the vintage look. I will add some more glue though to ensure that it doesn't lift off the surface of my tin. Then I'll apply a second coat to all of my tins. If you know what went wrong with my air dry clay, can you please let me know in the comments? I'm still learning when it comes to clay. My paint's performing well, it glides on beautifully, and I'll definitely only need the 2 coats for this. For the one that I've done upside down, I'm just going to paint the bottom as well. Now I'll move on to my other colours, and I've got these 4 tins that all fit inside of each other. So I'll use 4 of my paint colours for this. Here's colour number 6, colour number 8. I am loving the colours so far. Colour number 4, and I think this is my favourite at the moment. And colour number 7, which was a close second. Once the colour was dry, I added a second coat. Then I dried these and sealed them with a clear wax. This is a Feast & Watson product, and it's a furniture wax. It's been really good value, and I've been using it for a couple of years now. I'll let that really soak into the paint for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to take some antiquing wax. This product is by Folk Art. And I don't need very much because the clear wax is going to help me to control how much antiquing wax goes on to my project. So I buffed off a little bit of the clear wax, and now I can buff off the antiquing wax back to a level where I've achieved an older natural look to the tins. And I've just used a paper towel, but you can use a soft cloth. And that just left me with colour number 2 to test, and I'll put that on this little short tin. This was one of the talcum powder colours, and it barely needed a second coat. I wanted to see how the paint coped with a rub-on transfer, so I've taken this little rose design and I'll peel that off the carrier sheet and stick it down on the surface of my tin. Then with the little plastic spatula that comes with the rub-on transfers, I'm just going to rub from one side of the image to the other. Then I'll start to lift the carrier sheet and ensure that every part of the design has stuck down to the tin. Then you just rub across it with the carrier sheet just to ensure good adhesion, and your design is transferred as easily as that. And this paint took this transfer extremely well. Now I'm going to use the same sealing process. I'll put some clear wax on the surface of the tin. I'll add some antiquing wax and buff that off, leaving enough on there so that it gives the tin some age and it looks gorgeous, doesn't it? For the green tin, which is colour number 5, I'm going to use some Folk Art white wax. I won't need to put clear wax on first, and I'll just apply that the same way that I did the antiquing wax all over the tin and then buff it back with a paper towel. Apologies for jumping all over the place with these projects, but it's the way that they kind of happened. I think that wax looks great on darker colours. This is the difference between colours number 1 and 3. And I'll use antiquing wax on both of these, starting with colour number 1, the whiter one. And I'm going to try 2 different ways. I'll try putting the antiquing wax on directly before putting the clear wax on. I want to see if there's a difference between doing it the 2 different ways. So this one's kind of ending up quite muted. It's still getting that nice aged look though. And with the other one, the cream colour number 3, I'll do the clear wax first and then apply the antiquing wax and see if there's any difference. It certainly makes the wax more pliable and moves easier, but it also got down deeper into those crevices, I feel, and I preferred this method. I think it looks older and more aged compared to the other method. So you can use these tins for all sorts of things. You can put flowers in them, plants, but I'm going to fill the bottom with some brown paper. And then I'll add some oasis or floral foam. I thrifted a big bunch of faux flowers and got this floral foam out of the bottom, so I'll reuse it. And these are some of the leaves that came with it, and I'm just going to cover the base with the leaves. Hosta leaves, I think they are. And then I've got these succulents to pop in the top. And I just wash my faux plants and flowers in dishwashing liquid like you do your dishes. And that's paint colour number 1. For paint colour number 3, I'm going to take a nail and knock a hole into the middle of that tin and each of those coloured tins that fit into each other, and I'm going to make a wind chime of sorts with this. So I'll start with the very bottom, and I'm going to put this little wire heart, which is a broken piece of jewellery, right on the bottom so that it catches the wind and creates some movement for the chime. And I don't really like raw ends or knots showing, so I've glued the end to the main piece of twine and I'm winding around it with a piece of cotton until it disappears. I just think it's a tidier finish. Then I'll knot off my piece of cotton and trim off the end. Next I'm going to figure out where I want my narrowest tin to land, and I'll put a double knot there so that it hangs just above that heart. I'll use a bead between the knot and the tin, And I just wanted some beads that I didn't really think I'd use, but these ones had too big a hole, so I've changed them out for a bead with a smaller hole. And you can use literally any beads because they're not going to show in the finished project. Now I'll just thread that through, and I'm going to repeat that process, getting larger and larger with the tins. And I just am ensuring that they only overlap a little so that you can see as much of the tin as possible, but allowing some of the tin to be able to hit against each other so that it makes the sound. There is of course a raw edge inside each of the mouths of those tins, so they will scratch off a little bit of paint on each of the tins, but because this is going outside, it's going to start to age beautifully and rust up naturally in the areas where the paint chips are off, and I think that looks going to eventually be really beautiful. So I've finished the top tin with a few beads, and I'll just knot that off at the top. Then I'll create a loop at the top, and using glue and cotton I'll hide that raw end again. Now jumping back to my little tin which was colour number 2 on the colour chart, I'll also fill this with Oasis. And I have some little berry picks which were from the thrifted bouquet that I got. I don't know what these ones are called, but I'll just arrange those in the Oasis until I'm happy with how it looks, and this one's done. With the green tin, I'm simply going to fill it up with some kitchen utensils for styling. If I put this in my retail space, I'll put all my vintage rolling pins in it to display them. And now for the finished projects. So that's it for this week's video from beautiful New Zealand. Let me know what you thought of those projects. Did you have a favourite? Also let me know if you had a favourite colour, and don't forget I'd love to be naming one of these colours after you. So please get involved. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. I love hearing your comments and being able to interact with you personally. If you haven't already, please push the subscribe button. Share my videos if you know somebody who'd like to watch them. Like and comment to your heart's delight, and then the algorithm might like me a little bit better. And I guess I'll be seeing you in person next week and overcoming my mortal fear of putting my face on video. I am fully shaking in my boots. So I'll see you then. Bye for now.